All right, you lovely people. Hope you had a nice quick break there. So now in this video, I want to introduce the deliberative utilitarianism that comes from John Stuart Mill. And like I said at the end of the previous video, John Stuart Mill does agree with Jeremy Bentham on a few things because, after all, they're both utilitarians. And so to get us started then, for instance, John Stuart Mill does agree with Jeremy Bentham when it comes to consequentialism. Yes, they are both consequentialists. Now let's just recall what that means. So consequentialism, recall, it says that the overall goodness of outcomes, that is the goodness of outcomes for everyone affected by those outcomes, is the only thing with intrinsic moral value. And remember, this idea of consequentialism, we haven't talked about it in a while, but the idea of consequentialism, recall, has two main components. The first part, or the first component of consequentialism, is that morality should focus on the consequences of our actions. And number two, morality should focus on how our actions affect everyone. And we can definitely see Mill accepting both of these ideas. Again, the focus on the consequences of our action and the idea that we care about everyone in looking at this. So let's jump to page 195. Here we can see Mill say that, here's what, 195, what does Mill say? He says, motive has nothing to do with the morality of the action. He who saves a fellow creature from drowning does what is morally right, whether his motive be duty or the hope of being paid for his trouble. And so, yes, Mill clearly agrees with Bentham that only outcomes and consequences matter. Your motivation, your intention, why you did it is not important. Again, we focus on impact, not intention, or not motivation. Again, impact, outcomes, consequences. And again, that's the first part of consequentialism. Bentham said that. Mill agrees. Mill says, yep, I accept that. Now, there's the second part of consequentialism, which is that morality should focus on how our actions affect everyone, not just ourselves. So again, this isn't about prudence or caring only about your own interest. This also is not about altruism or only caring about everyone else. This is about consequentialism. Recall, this idea of consequentialism is a general responsiveness to the interests of everyone involved. And yeah, that includes you, that includes everyone. So this, again, recall, consequentialism is trying to integrate the concerns of prudence and altruism together into a concern for everyone. And we can also see Mill accept this part of consequentialism. Yeah, Mill is not an egoist, not at all. So if we jump to page 189, so go to page 189, we can see Mill say that the utilitarian standard is not the agent's own greatest happiness, but the greatest amount of happiness altogether. So again, altogether for everyone. Now, if we look on page 194, we can see also Mill where he says, what does he say? He says, as between his own happiness and that of others, utilitarianism requires him to be as strictly impartial as a disinterested and benevolent spectator. Our own biases can get in the way, so we have to imagine ourselves as disinterested, caring about the happiness of everyone, the well-being of everyone involved. And so again, though, in these quotes, we see that Mill he's not an egoist. He says you have to care about everyone, including yourself, but everyone as well. And indeed, just like we saw with Bentham, John Stuart Mill also has a very, very, very broad scope of who and what counts or what we should care about as utilitarians. So we got a little longer quote here on page 190. So you jump to page 190, you see where Mill says that, what does he say? According to the greatest happiness principle, the ultimate end is an existence exempt as far as possible from pain and as rich as possible in enjoyments. This is the standard of morality, which may be accordingly defined as the rules and precepts of human conduct, by the observance of which an existence such as been described might be, to the greatest number possible. There's your consequentialism. To the greatest number possible, secured to all mankind, and not to mankind only, but so far as the nature of things admits, to the whole sentient creation. So again, yes, remember we saw Bentham. Bentham said the pleasure of all sentient life matter. Mill agrees. Anything that experiences pleasure and pain matters in some sense, in some way. Though Mill might think a little differently than Bentham, as we'll see. But again, Mill is saying we need to care about non-human animals as well. Again, all of sentient creation, anything that can experience pleasure and pain like us matters in some way. And we might say, well, why does Mill? So we can review the video from a couple modules ago where Bentham says why we should care about everyone. Mill has an interesting, I think Mill could make a similar argument, but what we actually see Mill doing, it's actually quite cute. I love these cute arguments. And students in the past have told me this argument really resonates with them about why egoism just seems wrong in a way we haven't even seen yet. So this is pretty cool. So if you look on page 191, jump over there, we see Mill here. What does Mill say on 191? He says, when people who are tolerably fortunate in their outward lot do not find in life sufficient enjoyment to make it valuable to them, the cause generally is caring for nobody but themselves. To those who have neither private nor public affections, the excitements of life are much curtailed. Next to selfishness, the principal cause which makes life unsatisfactory is want of mental cultivation. Now, right now, I will point out, there's a lot going on here. It's a really cool passage. I love it. Mill is establishing a connection between selfishness and a lack of mental cultivation. He is going to say a person with cultivation naturally finds pleasure and enjoyment in the company of others. They're not just concerned about themselves, they're concerned about others. It's a very interesting idea. I'm going to come back to that at the end of my next video because there is something very, I think, important lurking there that we can, but we're not quite ready yet. We'll get there though. But in any case, if we continue down onto page 192, we can see Mill say, what does he say there? 192, he says, as little is there an inherent necessity that any human being should be a selfish egoist, devoid of every feeling or care, but those which center on his own miserable individuality. Now, in those quotes I've just read, maybe you see it, I'll just say it. John Stuart Mill is basically saying, if you only care about yourself, if you're only looking out for what satisfies you, then you're going to be miserable. The miserable existence. So that's the irony. By only caring about your happiness, you're going to be unhappy. What? Yeah, the idea he's saying is a selfish and egotistical person is not happy. The more you try to be selfish, the more you try to just care about your own happiness, the paradox is the more unhappy and miserable you're going to be. Whereas Mill is saying the more you care about others, the more you want them to be happy, the more empathy you have, and so on. These, he thinks, will make you actually quite happy and happier than you would be. So again, in the end, Mill is saying egoists are miserable people. They only care about their own happiness, and then they're not even happy. Oh, it's sad, but I love it. I think that's a very cute argument. I love cute arguments. I always tell you guys that. That is a cute argument, that an egoist cares only about themselves, and in doing so, only makes things worse for themselves. They're more unhappy. They're miserable. But again, I'll let you decide if you agree with that argument. It's a cute argument, but I guess it could be wrong. Are egoists really miserable people, or does truly caring about your friends, your family, your loved ones, does that make you more happy somehow? There's some science there. I'll let you Google it and see what you think. I won't say anymore. I want you to think about this stuff. I think it's a great question, though. Tweet me if you have ideas about it. Do it. I would love to hear what you guys think about that. In any case, I hope it's clear why Mill accepts consequentialism. Again, the idea, let's just repeat it, the idea of consequentialism. The overall goodness of outcomes is the only thing with intrinsic moral value. And again, we're looking at the outcomes, consequences of your actions. That's the first part. And then the second part, we should focus on how our actions affect everyone. And it's clear Mill agrees with, so again, John Stuart Mill agrees with Jeremy Bentham. Let's accept consequentialism. And I'll just kind of throw it up there. Mill also agrees with Bentham when it comes to welfarism. They're both welfarists as well. This is just kind of the bridging idea, nothing super critical here, but again, it's worth just fleshing it out to be complete. Again, recall just one more time, welfarism is the idea that the overall goodness of an outcome is measured solely by the well-being of everyone affected. So again, consequentialism, goodness of outcomes. Welfarism, well, goodness of outcomes is going to be focusing on well-being and Well-being, as you can guess, is probably going to be happiness, but what does happiness mean here? Because yes, that is the question that's next. So recall, Jeremy Bentham was a hedonist. Again, well-being is happiness, and happiness is pleasure and absence of pain. That was hedonism. That was Jeremy Bentham. Well, what does John Stuart Mill think? Ooh, it's a mystery. Well, let's look into the text, because I think if you look in certain places, John Stuart Mill does sound quite like a hedonist. So let's jump to page 186. Go to page 186, and here we see what does Mill say here? He says, the greatest happiness principle holds that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. By happiness is intended pleasure and the absence of pain. By unhappiness, pain and the privation of pleasure. So all that gobbledygook, again, he's just seems to be saying, like, yes, well-being is happiness. Happiness is pleasure and absence of pain. So, okay, Mill is sounding a lot like a hedonist in this passage. And indeed, if we keep on reading, let's 186 here. On 186, Mill goes on and he says, pleasure and the freedom from pain are the only things desirable as ends, and all desirable things are desirable either for the pleasure inherent in themselves or as means to the promotion of pleasure and the prevention of pain. So once again, we are seeing this core tenet of utilitarianism. We can't escape it. And the idea that we're always seeing is that morality is about pleasure and the absence of pain. Anything if you're ever doing morality, you're ultimately going to have to care about, according to these utilitarians, is pleasure and absence of pain. That's it. Everything is either about it or a means to get it. And again, that all sounds like Jeremy Bentham. So yeah, is Mill a hedonist? No. Shocking, I know. Clickbait, clickbait, clickbait. Mill thinks this hedonism has serious problems and Mill wants to resolve it. But how does he do it? Watch to find out. I love clickbait. Maybe I should go into that industry. Like and subscribe. I think I'm losing my mind. Send help. Or Cheetos. Anyway, before we go into that clickbait, why don't you rest the eyes? We'll do that. We'll do our stretch break. Rest the eyes, massage the brain, maybe walk, get us a little quick stretch in, and then we can come back to see how John Stuart Mill begins to separate himself from Jeremy Bentham and classical utilitarianism. But we'll get to there in a moment. See you back after you've had a stretch.